Let's, of course, take you back to that story where Finland and Sweden have asked to join NATO. And we did promise you that we'll speak to our correspondent, Nick Haper, who's live for us in Washington, D.C. on the more of this. Of course, you remember President Joe Biden speaking to those presidents a little earlier on, as you saw on the program. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. President Joe Biden's statement was clear that the U.S. supports Finland and Sweden joining NATO, but Turkey is against this. Will Finland and Sweden finally join the alliance?
Well, the hope is that they will, but this is the big problem. They need every single NATO member, around 30 of them, to support their bid to join the alliance. And if Turkey blocks them, then they won't be able to join. We have seen an unprecedented effort by the United States over the last few days to try and persuade Turkey. We know that the State Department have been in talks, including the US Secretary of State meeting with his Turkish counterpart, really to try and push them on the issue of trying to get them to agree for Sweden and Finland to join NATO. The problem for President Erdogan of Turkey is that he feels that those two countries are harbouring terrorists, in his words. Sweden and Finland both have sizable Kurdish populations. Now, Turkey views the Kurdish population in its own country as problematic. It views the People's Workers' Party, the PKK, as a terrorist organisation. Now, Sweden has also labelled the PKK as a terrorist organisation, but it still has around 100,000 Kurds living in Sweden, some of them in very high-profile positions. And President Erdogan is quite simply saying that while those Kurds are in that country, he views those Nordic nations as harbouring people who could bring ill to the NATO alliance. And that is why he's blocking it, and that is why we're seeing President Biden doing all he can to try and unblock that blockage.
Now, Nick, let's say then they all agree and allow them to join in. How long will it take for the two countries to be officially members?
Well, it certainly isn't something that can happen overnight. It more likely will take several months. You may remember that when Ukraine was talking about trying to join, there were discussions that that would take years because of some of the internal problems within their country to make that happen. Now, Finland and Sweden could see a much quicker accession to NATO. It'll mean that all NATO countries need to agree. The United States, for example, is trying to line their ducks up as quickly as possible. Biden has spoken to Congress because Congress would need to approve the two countries joining. And then it would go through as quickly as possible. As President Biden said, the two countries have the ability to join. They are strong democracies. They would increase the security that NATO has, being able to offer military partners within the NATO alliance. He feels that it could happen quickly, but like I say, it won't happen overnight. It's something that obviously with the red tape involved will take a matter of months.
Any reaction from Russia?
Well, not to the meeting at the White House within the last couple of hours, but we do know that President Putin is very unhappy. Remember, his whole argument in terms of invading Ukraine was partly to do with the fact that it didn't want Ukraine to join NATO before the invasion. That was one of his red line policies, telling other NATO members, telling Western countries that he wanted Ukraine never to be allowed to join NATO. Of course, that has backfired, and what we've now seen is other countries who are not NATO members wanting to push forward with their membership. He is very angry that both countries want to try and do this. He's made threats towards both countries. For example, we've even seen Poland say that they would be ready to defend Sweden and Finland if Russia were to attack either of those two countries before they became NATO members. It has angered the Russian president, and certainly not exactly something that he wanted as an outcome of his invasion of Ukraine.
And Nick, finally, I mean, we're looking at President Joe Biden talking about the fact that he is now going to be leaving for South Korea. What is the main purpose of that visit?
That's right, yeah, he's just jumped on a plane. He'll be heading to South Korea, then on to Japan. It's a 5-day trip, really to try and build alliances with those two countries. They are already strong partners and allies of the United States. There is sizable trade and military and economic agreements in place between the three countries. But he's also going in order to show that there is that strong united front to stand up to China's competition and aggression, and to send a clear message to Beijing that really they can't take Russia's example of its invasion of Ukraine as reason to attack Taiwan, because there is growing feeling amongst US intelligence officials that China is lining up to try and attack the island at some point in the near future. There have been some assessments that it could take place in the next 5 years. Now, it is a self-governed island, but Beijing views it as its own, and the US has said very firmly that it would not stand for any invasion by Beijing of Taiwan. So by going to Asia, President Biden, his first trip to the region while president, is showing that he's standing shoulder to shoulder with South Korea and with Japan, and that they firmly rebuke any ideas that China may have of invading Taiwan. Also, while in the region, President Biden will be taking part in an in-person summit of the Quad. That's India, Australia, Japan and the US. These 4 countries that share a number of different agreements, but also have that shared goal of trying to counter China's rise when it comes to aggression in the South China Sea, but also the competition that it poses to all 4 countries.
All right, Nick, thank you so much for giving us those insights into this particular situation, as really a lot of people are waiting to see what becomes of this application by Finland and Sweden. But thank you so much for your time. That was Nick Haper.